So this is TSVWG, and we're the chairs online, and we're glad to meet you remotely today, in person someday soon. Today we're going to be looking at the status, and we're going to be going through the ECN drafts.
So I get to run the status. This is a title slide. This is a note well slide with which you're all expected to be familiar, courtesy of registering for this meeting. It applies to you. Let's see, we have a note taker, right? Do we have a Jabber scribe, or are we just going to rely on watching the chat and Meet Echo?
I'm watching the Jabber also.
Okay, excellent. In general, we need reviewers for working group drafts. The more the merrier. And a reminder to please add TSVWG to the name of any internet draft submitted that you want to bring the attention of TSVWG. We eventually find them. Some Meet Echo usage tips. Chat and meeting notes. Separate tabs and windows may be easier to use. Chat can be torn off into a Jabber-like window, and meeting notes often work in a separate tab or window. It enables you to keep the Meet Echo focus on speakers, queue, and slides. In discussion, please use Meet Echo mic queue. Click the hand icon to join the mic queue. Please do not use the mic icon until acknowledged by the chairs. We're trying to be polite and not interrupt each other. As noted earlier, document quality relies on reviews. Please review documents here and at least one of the working group. If you'd like documents you care about reviewed, then please put the effort in to review other documents so that there's work going on to advance all of them. There's a list on the slide of some upcoming IDs that need review. All right, what have we done since last time we met virtually? Transfer confidentiality impacts, RFC 9065 has been published. Congratulations and thank you, Colin and Gory. We have no drafts at the IESG. The SCTP NAT draft is with the AD after review. There's been discussion going on how to move forward. I think there's agreement in principle on what to do there. Is that a fair summary?
Talk about it more. Yes, and we'll talk about it more at the next meeting. Oh, Martin, do you want to say something SCTP now?
Yeah, just as far as I see it, that is currently the ball is in the court of the authors. There are some AD review comments out, and we're just waiting for a new draft.
Okay. We have two IDs for group chairs and authors after working group last call. Well, that's actually me trying to get these drafts to advance. I'm 1 for 2. The ECN for tunnels that use shim headers draft has no open issues. We resolved the fragmentation issue. The ECN encapsulation for lower layer protocols. I sent a note to the list recently. We need to replace reframing interaction text, get this draft on its way, and then go explore that area in detail in an additional draft or drafts. I'm hoping to work with the editor, and perhaps we can get these on their way to the AD and IESG before we next meet. And we do need to do that because we have 9 other working group drafts listed on this slide, including one that we just adopted on default DSCP selection for DiffServe. A few related drafts you might be interested in. Path MTU discovery is a topic on which work never seems to cease. Gory has a draft on adding this to UDP options. There's a draft in 6-man on IPv6, and the TRAN working group is working on a draft for stun. In addition, there is now another draft on transfer protocols and satellites. That is on the Path-Aware Networking Research Group agenda for Thursday. In addition, I think I've seen some discussion over in I think it's INT area on satellite internet concerns. There is an application-aware networking BOF Friday noon U.S. Pacific time that may be of interest as applications use transport and interact with it. Multipath DCCP, there's the draft name. It's on TSVWG agenda, and sure, every time I do these drafts, there's always a mistake. There's your off by one day mistake. You saw the work group chair is not perfect. It'll be on TSVWG agenda on Thursday. Work group adoption requested. Network layer multipath is another document of interest, and then we have real-time transport object over unidirectional transport, a name that got the acronym route. This will be on the TSV area agenda Fridays. Motivated by multicast, it's the same problem area as Flute, which is RFC 6726. Please do go to TSV area and take a look at this, because if there's interest in this, it may come to us as Transport Area Working Group of last resort. Agenda. Okay, we're about to go bash the agenda. We've done the note well. And there's another off by one error. It's Thursday. I get to upload V4 after this, clearly. So document function status, we'll do a very brief milestones review. In particular, we're not going to try to update the milestones as part of this. The chairs will do that offline. General request. Where TSVWG is very short meeting time this week. We only have 2 hours. We could easily have used 4. Please keep comments brief and to the point to make best use of time. Okay, very quick fly through of milestones. There are 3 drafts on this page that had June 21st milestones. 2 of them are the ECN encapsulation drafts, which I'm hoping will be submitted fairly soon. And the chairs will determine a new UDP options draft date. That's the 3rd one after this meeting week. This page all has milestones that we haven't overrun yet. So far, they look okay. Chairs will revise based on what we think is actually plausible and reasonable, as we somehow don't think all of the drafts are going to get, all of these drafts are going to get out of the working group between now and the next meeting. New dates will be determined for the L4s operations draft, which will be sometime after October, DTLS CTP draft, and the DiffServ default selection draft we just adopted. We will figure out dates for those after the meeting week. Those are all likely to be at least sometime in 2022, as we have more than enough drafts for 2021. Okay, time to go bash the agenda. So today is agenda and draft status, chair's update, which you're getting part of, and we will also quickly talk about 3 liaison communications that we've dealt with since the last meeting cycle. We will be doing ECN drafts today. L4s and L4s ECN drafts and the L4s operational guidance drafts. And so today is entirely devoted to L4s. Thursday, brief update on the SCTP BIS spec, which is going to go to working group last call sometime soon, we believe. 2 working group drafts on SCTP DLS, and the NAT draft we talked about recently. We'll pick that up on Friday. The new DSCP selection draft, the NQB PHB draft, and UDP options. And then down at the end, and we will try very, very hard to get here, I think we've shortchanged him more than once, we will get to Marcus's draft on multipath DCCP, for which working group adoption is requested, and I will go fix that draft name and upload the slides, because that's not the right name either. You tell I did last minute slide preparation. So aside from fixing the bugs in the slides, does anybody want to bash the agenda? Okay, seeing nobody. Okay, seeing nobody, we're going to see the agenda bash. Let's quickly do the liaisons. Hang on, I got to go switch windows there. Okay, let's quick do the liaisons, then I've got to go fix these slides. Okay, so the WBA liaison. We got a WBA liaison that basically suggested in pursuit of QoS, end-to-end QoS across Wi-Fi and 5G, that the IETF ought to work on a mapping between 5G, 5QIs, and IETF DSCPs. Response was sent back to the WBA, indicating a plausible area of focus, and we'll wait to see what we hear back from them.
The new DSCP work item might help provide a bit more insight, so we'll track that as that goes ahead.
Mm-hmm. Okay, 3GPP and Gsma Liaisons. Those ones fortunately weren't mine.
3GPP relates to DTLS with SCTP. It was a request to update that spec, mainly to send larger payloads, and we have taken on a work item to service that. If we try and keep to their deadline, we'll have to be sharp and quick on completing it, so we'll just move. GSMA relates to the DCCP work that's going to be discussed for adoption later this week, and as we discuss that, we'll be able to provide more feedback to that group.
Okay, sounds good. With that, I think I get to exit and go fix my slides. Wes, you get to organize the L4s session.
Says we have no slides available to share. Let me switch to screen sharing. All right, this is less ideal, but maybe you can see my charts. Okay, so we wanted to do a quick recap on the state of the 4 working group adopted L4s drafts, and wanted to start with letting people know that we had a virtual interim. I think it was a couple of months ago, and well, May 10th it says on this chart, and this was focused on 2 topics. There were a few dozen attendees, and we wanted to try to make progress in the working group on the 2 classes of issues that we still saw a lot of discussion ongoing on. And the first topic was finalizing transport requirements for L4s ID use. There was a lot of feedback about the reasonableness of the requirements for implementers to take and be able to build something with, and multiple implementation teams provided feedback. And we think we're in a good state on that now after some document updates happened following the interim. And then we also wanted to make more time for interactive discussion on the safe for experimentation on the internet topic. And that continues to be one where we have lively discussion on the mailing list. Some good things have happened since the last cycle. So there, Bob will talk about more, but there's been work on the anti-replay and resequencing kinds of things that could lead to problems when reordering is induced, potentially. And I think that's moving in the right direction on that topic. We also, in general, polled the working group at this interim on whether people were feeling that the mechanisms defined were suitable for experimentation in parts of the internet. There was not full agreement yet. There are some issues. I think David actually has a recap list we'll briefly go to before Bob's charts, but there was a majority of the working group, actually a strong majority, that were participating in that meeting and felt we were able to effectively use the developing operational guidance draft to safely proceed with experimentation. And so I think we're now feeling like we're ready for next steps of making a quick document update that the editors have agreed to on removing any potential suggestion about changes to IPsec. We don't want that to be on the table. IPsec is IPsec as it is today, and L4s isn't going to change it. And we want to take the 3 protocol documents to working group last call to gauge whether there's support in the working group to publish these. And in the meantime, we're continuing work on the L4s draft. I guess Bob's in the queue already. Go ahead, Bob.
No, I just wanted to say that the draft would have been updated with that change, but there's an XML problem. It now insists on the new version of the XML, and I had already filed a bug a few months ago, which I can't get past, so I can't post the draft at the moment. But I'll have to sort that out with a bit longer time to do it.
Cool. So yeah, the high order bit is that update is going to happen as soon as Bob sorts out the XML issue, and then we will be planning on starting a working group last call on these 3 documents. David has a list of issues. I can hand the ball to you now, David, if it's good. David has a list of things that, from his standpoint, we've heard are still concerns in the working group and want to make sure we continue to look at in regard to last call comments that come in. David, do you want to take the presentation away?
Okay, we can see that. But we can't hear you.
You don't have a mic enabled.
Icon, shouldn't I? All right, let's start over again. These slides were assembled working with Jonathan Morton and a number of other folks who've been expressing concerns about L4s. So I'm going to basically quickly read these into the record and then hand control back over to Wes to figure out to take me forward. So the first slide concerns L4s internet coexistence. Receiver can't distinguish whether CE marks inbound packets are from L4s or RFC 3168 marking. It's a fundamental confusion that underpins a lot of the L4s issues you'll see in these slides, and in particular, it's not compatible with RFC 4774 option 3 friendly coexistence. L4s transports assume CE marked L4s signals, which is often not the case today. There's significant middle box deployments of RFC 3168. Alternative backup of ECN, RFC 8511, still requires multiplicative decrease, and L4s transports don't do that. If L4s and conventional flows share a FIFO queue and an AQM, the conventional flow may suffer badly, perhaps, even though the FIFO and AQM correspond with all applicable RFCs. And the general state of things is safety, compatibility, and coexistence are still problematic in the running code that's available for L4s. All right, now, second slide is that this is mostly about the dual queue structure and the dual queue AQM. That structure is creating denial of service vulnerability in some tunnels, which have a replay window. Attacker advances the replay protection window by sending low latency traffic, conventional traffic arrives after the window has advanced and gets discarded rather than forwarded. It gives an uncontrolled throughput bonus to traffic in the low latency queue, easy exploited, no enforced congestion control or required admission control in L4s as currently proposed. A diff-served PHP would likely require admission control. Take a look at the voice admit PHP as an example. The AQRM algorithm disadvantages fragmented small MTU traffic because its congestion marking algorithms bias on small packets. And the dual queue AQRM algorithm is intolerant of bursty traffic, bursts from real-time video or bursty link behavior such as Wi-Fi could cause large reduction in good put. And that's it. These slides will be posted. Wes, back to you.
So I think, Bob, you're going to provide a update on what's happened in the drafts. Do you want me to project charts, or do you have the? Yeah. I apologize. I'll have to do it from the browser, so they won't be properly zoomed and such, but I can do that.
Can I just, while you're doing that, clarify, David, was that you presenting those slides, or was that you presenting them for Jonathan? And was it you presenting them as a chair, or what?
I think it's a mix. The issues arise from Jonathan and a number of collaborators, and I'm passing them along as preview of coming attraction. We're going to get to deal with these one way or another working group last call.
Right, because I mean, I wouldn't have disputed many of those points, and so
I understand that, and this was not intended as an authoritative statement of this is the way things are, but a heads up. This is a little bit of the adventure that's coming.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So this is I've been asked to just do a sort of more administrative update, but there's some interesting stuff in here as well. So this is about all three L4s drafts. Just got 10 minutes. Next. And this is a very quick recap of what L4s is. Essentially, very low queuing day for all delay for all internet applications, not just for some, including capacity seeking ones, so you get full throughput. Next. So before we get on to the drafts, just a bit of activity outside of the IETF, just to keep people updated on what's going on. In the 3GPP, Ingemar reports to us, Ingemar Janssen, that things are progressing on L4s in 3GPP, and the current favor is for L4s to have 5G quasi-identifiers, a 5G quasi-identifier to separate it, which sort of seems strange, but we can talk about that. And then use feedback and forward, much like the master's thesis that Ingemar pointed to that was done under his supervision, rather than adding ECM bits down at the radio link control layer. Also, Ingemar has pointed us to a couple of papers, one with a lot of useful simulation results with performance evaluations. So there's generally a lot going on there. One more cable modem has been certified for low latency DOCSIS, which is includes support for L4s. That is, low latency DOCSIS does, therefore that modem does. And Nokia reports that they have more Wi-Fi devices they've released, and soon some fixed wireless access ones that support L4s. And they've also initiated several trials with operators and application providers. We've had Pete Heist continuing testing and evaluation, which Greg mentions in his talk, so I won't say any more on that here. And some really good work on the Linux implementation of the whole suite, but primarily TCP Prague and particularly Accurate ECN is now available for BBR, DCTCP, TCP private, in fact, any congestion control in Linux. So you can do sort of A/B testing, changing the congestion control without also having to change the feedback. So you can look for differences in the congestion controls without being confused by the feedback. That's everything so far on that. So next, please. Right, so the 3 drafts, I'm going to go through just very quickly what has changed in them and why. Vidi gave a great review of L4s architecture document, which is now at draft 10. It's been there for most of the month. Asked to explain how an FQ L4s node works a bit more clearly, so have done that. I won't say now how, you can go and read the draft. There were some numerical examples of what the scaling problem was with Reno and Cubic, and they didn't include Cubic's Reno friendly mode, so that's now fixed and the numbers are all fixed. And extensive clarifications, etc., improvements based on Vidi's comments, and you'll see all that having gone on the list as well. So next, so the architecture draft is now up to spec, at least as far as Vidi could find. And the ECN protocol for L4s, which is ECN L4s ID, would be 19, as I said. That's why I put the ++ here, except I couldn't post it, and thank you, Stuart, for the advice. I think I'll just end up posting it without the XML. The interaction with the VPN anti-replay protection that was talked about before, essentially we have stuck to talking about VPN configuration in the draft, given it's not meant to be in scope to talk about VPN implementations and changes to them. That's out of scope for L4s. So we've focused on configuring the VPN so it's got a sufficiently large anti-replay window, which gets rid of the attack that, or if you do that, and of course that is the big if, then you won't have that problem and you won't have the vulnerability to the attack, which was mentioned in those slides Jonathan pointed out. And we have put the attack in the security considerations and documented all this, and thank you very much for Sebastian originally for pointing it out. There's something David wanted done. RC 4774 is cited in the draft, and it's put in better context. Thank you for that. I hope it's now okay. Lots of consistency between drafts done in the editorial changes, and a couple of things we haven't changed, one of which I've just been talking with Derek on the list. I put out a general request on inter-area and PALS lists for whether there's any likelihood that there are any tunnels that do resequencing. L2TP can do it, but it's generally used for the control channels. And Derek has pointed out that there are GTP tunnels that do that, and there's also a Microsoft VPN product. And it's just a question of whether we need to say don't go and enable resequencing, because then if there's any change in the order of the packets within that tunnel, you know, where your L4s traffic is put through the queue before the classic traffic, the resequencing will just put it all back the other way again and put it all back how it was when it started. But the reason we haven't written anything in the draft, which we could do if necessary, is that we don't believe that there's anything that sequencing goes on, and where if it did, we think, for instance, in 3GPP, people would be very much aware that they were going to put in a low delay service. They wouldn't then resequence it so it didn't have low delay anymore. So it's just a question of whether we ought to put in something that's slightly patronizing to tell people not to do something daft. We can have some conversation on that during the working group last call, but I it's not something I'd like to put in the draft if we don't have to, but only because I find it rather patronising to people. And the work we did mostly at the interim on the product requirements, or up to the interim, which is mostly in section 4. It's been pretty stable since then, and the comments we had from all the developers were very useful, changed the text, and it seems that they're now happy with that, or at least we haven't had any further requests to change anything. So that's that. Next. This one is dual queue coupled, and I just want to point out that we've, I think, gone above and beyond to address a question from Sebastian about why the target default target is set to 15 milliseconds, and there's actually, I don't think anyone's ever had a 9-page report on why one particular parameter is set to a certain number, but it goes into some depth, including lots of survey of the characteristics of the internet in different countries and all the rest of it, and added some justification for why other parameters are set the way they are, all in the appendix. So I just wanted to jump to the next slide. How long have we got? Where are we? Yeah, I was going to jump this if we hadn't got time, but just to say that part of that exercise of doing the parameters, justifying the parameter, involved justifying the target at 15 milliseconds, and we were looking at the RTT around the world from user to CDN using a RIPE Atlas probes study, and this plot shows those figures along with the average bandwidth per country from another study as a scatter plot. And just for everyone's interest, we've put on top of that the curve at which Cubic switches to or from its Reno friendly mode, and discovered that actually once you introduce AQMs, and this allows for the 15 millisecond target in the AQM, so all the points are shifted up 15 milliseconds from their base RTTs, then still nearly everyone in the world is running Reno, even if they think they're running Cubic, or at least it's not quite the same, because you still get the acceleration, but essentially you're running an the completely unscalable Reno, and it looks like no matter how much we try and get away from it, Reno is still there underneath everything. Next. That's it. And Q&A, I've been asked to announce, will be after Greg's talk.
Yeah, we were planning to save Q&A for after Greg's talk, just because the agenda is so tight. So, Greg, did you want to project your own charts, or do you want me to try to pull those up too?
I can try to project. I have not tried that before with Meet Echo, but
it looks like it's going to work.
whoa, okay. All right, are you seeing the slides?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. All right, so this is the update on the L4s Ops Draft. And as a reminder, I'm the editor of the draft. It's a product of contributions from a number of people within the working group. As I've said in the past, if you think there's something missing from this draft, or something could be written better, explained better, certainly comments are helpful. Contributions of text to address the issue is even more helpful. So, a reminder on the scope of the draft and its current status. This is intended to focus on the concern that was raised around the possible rate imbalance in shared queue RFC 3168 bottlenecks. So many of the issues that were listed in the slides a few minutes ago that David presented. It's intended to provide guidance for operators of end hosts, operators of networks, and researchers in order to identify if those issues actually exist in practice and how to prevent them from causing rate imbalance. The working group adopted the draft in March of this year, and since then there have been two working versions posted. I presented at the interim meeting the draft 00, and then draft 01 I have uploaded just recently. This is not a draft that we're seeking working group last call on currently. As was discussed earlier, be on a little bit longer timeline. In terms of the deltas in draft 01 versus the previous version, not a lot of major change in this draft. Probably the biggest change is organizational, but it does have some importance to it. That is the options that we describe for network operators, operators of networks that implement RFC 3168 bottlenecks. We've organized those into a preferred set, a less preferred set, and a last resort set. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Also added a mention of AFD, or approximate fair dropping, which is a feature supported by some switch equipment, I think primarily Cisco equipment. And so we've added a section on that and how it could be configured to address the issue. A mention of who is impacted. Specifically, it's generally not going to be the L4s experimenter that sees any degradation in throughput if there's a shared 3168 bottleneck. So that's mentioned more upfront in the document. Added more discussion of FQ, including a request from Pete Heiss to discuss a configuration that is used apparently by some network operators, where they use the Linux FQ CODL Q disk, but configure the hashing in a way that turns it, instead of a per flow queuing system, into a per user queuing system. And the result of that is that from each user's perspective, they're effectively seeing a single shared queue running CODL. And so it looks an awful lot like the situation that this draft is intending to talk about. So, so that's discussed here. And then a little bit more detail on some of the recent detection experiments that had been done fairly recently. Apple's study, Jay Collins' study, and then Pete Heiss work with a Czech ISP. And then a mention of a measurement study, less to do with CE detection, but more just monitoring traffic and looking at prevalence of ECN marking. All right, the outline. I won't go through this in detail. You can certainly grab the draft and take a look at it. Maybe we'll just skip on past that then. So back to this split of the options into these three categories. So this is the section 6, which talks about, so you're a network operator and you have RFC 3168 implemented in your network. What can you do to make things work better in the L4s world? So we split these options again into these three buckets. The ones that fall into the less preferred or last resort options are options that have some downside to them that may outweigh the benefits that they would provide. And so that's why we've split those out into separate sections, or separate subsections, I should say. In particular, the less preferred options, there are several that are listed there. I grouped them all for purposes of this slide into a single bullet, treat ECT1 as not ECT. And so that addresses the fairness imbalance that could potentially exist with classic traffic mixed with L4s traffic. The downside to it is it disables low loss for the L4s traffic. Basically, L4s traffic then is treated as not ECT and would see packet loss as its congestion signal. The reason why that downside might outweigh the benefits is that for a sender that is currently implementing classic ECN, if these if this network option was implemented in a lot of networks, then they would have a dilemma of, do I stick with classic ECN or do I move to L4s, given that in some networks I would see a regression to not ECT performance or not ECT behavior. The bottom two in the last resort section are still included in the draft. I think I got a comment, at least from one person, that maybe since those are the last resort options, maybe we really shouldn't even be mentioning them. We do explicitly indicate that these are not recommended, but they're listed more or less for completeness. Turning off 3168 support altogether, so no ECN support in the network would be one, and revert the network to classic packet drop behavior. And then the other one, bleaching the ECT1 packets to not ECT is listed as well. Also addresses the fairness imbalance, but then not only disables L4s within the network that has the 3168 equipment, but elsewhere down the path as well. And if that option is implemented by a lot of networks, would make any potential future use of ECT1 in the event that the L4s experiment ends and we decide to try to reclaim that code point for a different purpose, would make that more difficult. So the rest of the options, I'll go back up to the top. The preferred options are listed more or less in, I think, a preference order, starting with upgrading those bottlenecks to be L4s aware as being the most beneficial approach. And then a number of options that may be more easily implemented in some equipment, but don't provide all of the benefits that complete L4s awareness would provide. And then the one at the bottom of the preferred options list, do nothing. So in situations where fairness imbalance is not considered to be an issue, doing nothing is better than the options that are later in the slide. So that's, again, the main change so far in this draft. In addition, there are some expectations on how the experiment goes and how it gets deployed as we move into the start of the experiment. Some of this is mentioned in the draft, in section 5 of the draft, and I have a question on the next slide as to should we say more on this, but general view is that it starts with networks enabling L4s support, either via the dual queue coupled AQM functionality that's provided in that draft, or via an L4s aware FQ implementation. Those are both options that have been discussed quite a bit in the working group. And then along the same timelines as network enablement of the feature, applications and operating systems add support for congestion control features, both the receiver feedback and the sender behavior. Expectation is the receiver congestion feedback could be on by default and available, and then the sender behavior starts as default off, and that is kind of the control of the experiment is on the sender behavior primarily. So I'm not expecting a flag day where all of a sudden everyone tries to switch from classic congestion control to L4s, but rather that end host operators would selectively enable L4s on senders and use some canary-based methods of turning it on a subset of paths or a subset of connections on paths, and leaving other paths or other connections with either classic ECN or not ECT, and then comparing the performance across those different variants. And those types of methods used in a progressive way, right? Starting off with lab tests, moving to limited field tests, large-scale field tests, etc. And so the idea is to run an experiment in a progressive way so that any issues that might occur can be identified while they're still small issues. All right, what's left as far as I know in the draft? A couple of items. So one
Craig?
is, should we? Oh yeah.
Martin has his hand up.
Yeah, just a clarifying question. Is that canary stuff, is that in the draft already, or is that something you're intending to add? Sorry if you already said that. I missed it.
So there is text in section 5 that mentions progressive deployment. So starting with lab tests and increasing from there. Nothing mentions canary-based methods. So that's kind of the question I had for the group: is should we say more on that in order to give experimenters more guidance there?
Corey, you're next in the queue.
Just on the canary-based methods, I think we probably could say more on that, and I'm happy to try and make some text for this and avoid this horrible echo I seem to have suddenly got.
Okay.
We're echoing back through your mic, I think, Greg, but David is next in the queue.
With Corey, I think it would be good to write this up in particular because this is one of the very few things we seem to have available to us that might help with the innocent bystander concern.
Okay, good. Yeah, I would definitely appreciate suggestions on text for that. So Corey, I'll definitely take you up on that.
Coming back on that, I mean, I don't think I have anything special to say about this. It's a very common way of deploying transport mechanisms in today's internet. So anyone else who wants to come and join me in writing or volunteering text, I'd very much welcome.
Yeah, I think it's a common technique used for deploying new features on internet services in general, beyond even congestion control. Right? So, I'm sure there's a lot of material we can draw on and expertise in the work.
I think it would be meaningful too if the people who are concerned about the effect on bystanders would find this compelling, that you were adding it and fleshing out more information and guidance on it. But I guess Jonathan's in the queue. Maybe he's going to talk about this. Go ahead, Jonathan.
So I don't yet have any opinion on the canary-based stuff. I'm going to have to see how it's defined. But I was going to talk about short flows thing. Just point out that 10 minutes is definitely too long to be a short flow.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, that was a comment that showed up on the mailing list. I'd welcome data or other input on how better to describe that. And I can't see the mic queue because I'm on full screen here. So if there are others,
Do not see anyone queue at the moment. I don't know if in response to that you're asking Jonathan back what he thinks a short flow should be. I heard him say 10 seconds isn't a good magic number, but and you say you're asking for feedback on that, but I don't. How do we want to come to a resolution on that?
I think this thing about short flows being harmless is probably the wrong approach entirely. But when we have if we start a bug flow in competition with an IPTV set-top box, the IPTV set-top box runs out of buffer in 10 seconds. So clearly the harm is happening much sooner than I think framing, but 2 seconds is definitely too high, even if it is the right framing. That's what I'm going to say today.
Turn off your mic to see whether it helped with the echo. Can't tell. So go ahead and turn it back on if you have more comments.
Okay, I was double muted there, so I don't think it can be coming from me. Yeah, Jonathan, or I guess it was Pete who brought it up on the mailing list. If there is a different way you think we could describe that is more useful to application developers and deployers of servers, I'd be interested in reviewing that. And I think that, the key thing is this is a steady state unfairness situation, right, where the imbalance in interpretation of CE marks results in the unfairness at steady state. So I think it's something like flows that exit the startup behavior and are in a congestion avoidance mode. And how do we define that in a way that's easy for server operators to understand?
It's not steady state, it's a dynamic phenomenon.
All right, Kevin Smith, you're in the queue.
Kevin Smith, Vodafone, just a question for clarification, please. When we say a flow is 10 seconds, does that mean it's expected to be in the queue for 10 seconds, or is it some other way of measuring that seconds, for example, playback time when it reaches the client?
I'm taking it in for completion time.
Yeah, I think flows that are long enough that they're I think we're past the initial startup where the flow is pushing into the channel, trying to make space for itself, where we expect other flows to be impacted, right? They have to throttle down to allow the new flow in. At some point at the end of that, you get into this regime where it's possible for the different interpretation of the CE marks to cause low throughput for a classic ECN. 10 seconds is an example that was given in the document currently, but that was intended to be the entire flow completion time of that flow. But clearly we can say something better on that.
I don't
The
see
rest
anyone
of
else.
this discussion we have to take
Go
offline.
ahead, Jonathan. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is a difficult area because it's also true that if when a new flow enters a system, the system gives it capacity too quickly. You know, like if another flow has a certain amount of capacity and then suddenly it's cut to half, say, because two flows appear, that can also be a problem for the first flow because it just doesn't have time for the application to adapt it. So, you know, there is some number that that is required here. To, you know, you mustn't have immediate fairness either, or it's not necessarily good to have immediate fairness. I won't say you mustn't. And so one also has to look at the behavior of non-L4s flows and how long they take to converge, which can be, you know, multiple tens of seconds. Now, certainly they reach near convergence, you know, maybe after 10 seconds or something, but there's you know, if we're trying to make things exactly fair all the time, that's not a good idea, I don't think. And so there's, I don't think we can put a number on it, but we can say something relative to the behavior of other flows, and, you know, it shouldn't be any you know, significantly worse than other flows or something like that. How long they take to converge.
Does anyone else have comments on the L4s Ops Draft or the other three L4s drafts that we're bringing to working group last call after the meeting? Go ahead, Bob.
I need to quickly say I have now posted that update to the ID draft.
Perfect. David?
Is that one of the purposes of working for last call is to round up the issues. Let's figure out what we are looking at that is a potential problem area of the draft, and where do things stand. Not all working group last calls are successful. I speak as the shepherd of a draft that took 3 working group last calls to get through.
Yep, I think that's a good thing to point out. Last call doesn't mean the drafts are done. Okay. Well, that was all we had on the agenda for today, and we have 1 minute left. Gory or David, is there anything else you want to say?
I'd say it would be really good to come to the next meeting where we discuss all the other drafts. So we're also going to be organising some interims as we look to see what work is left over at this IETF. So this is a meeting where we're going to move quickly through a lot of material in the next session. So my reason for mentioning it now is please have a look ahead and think what it is that you'd really want to talk about in the next session.
I wanted to plus one Gory's remarks.
All right, well, shall we adjourn the meeting then?